They told me I was sick. At first, I didn't believe them. There wasn't anything that gave me the feeling I was. I felt normal. I worked a normal job. I liked what I was doing. Then I noticed strange things happening to the people around me. And that's when my life took a turn for the worse. Mary Mallon, better known as Typhoid Mary, was the first person in the United States identified as an asymptomatic carrier of the pathogen associated with typhoid fever. She was presumed to have infected 51 people, 3 of whom died over the course of her career as a cook. She was twice forcibly isolated by public health authorities and died after a total of nearly 3 decades in isolation. This video isn't necessarily creepy, so I know my standard intro looks slightly over the top. We have covered many serial killers already and there are thousands more to come, but in this case we aren't dealing with a serial killer. Although Mary caused a few deaths, it wasn't because she murdered them. In the old days it would be rather easy for a sick person to infect another person, causing an almost endless spiral of sickness and death. That's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with someone who was apparently sick herself, but didn't really show any signs of it. So she looked healthy enough, but wherever she went, people would suddenly almost mysteriously get ill and die. After witnessing these events for a while, it didn't take long for people to point their finger at Mary and see her as a suspect. But what they discovered wasn't a cold-blooded murderer, but an innocent woman who accidentally caused others to die. Yeah, it's pretty weird, I know. So let me share with you some of the more in-depth details of the case. From 1900 to 1907, Mallon worked as a cook in the New York City area for 7 families. In 1900, she worked in Mamaroneck, New York, where, within 2 weeks of her employment, residents developed typhoid fever. In 1901, she moved to Manhattan, where members of the family for whom she worked developed fevers and diarrhea, and the laundress died. Mallon then went to work for a lawyer. She left after 7 of the 8 people in that household became ill. In 1906, she took a position in Oyster Bay, Long Island, and within 2 weeks, 10 of the 11 family members were hospitalized with typhoid. She changed jobs again, and similar occurrences happened in 3 more households. She worked as a cook for the family of a wealthy New York banker, Charles Henry Warren. When the Warrens rented a house in Oyster Bay for the summer of 1906, Mallon went along too. From August 27th to September 3rd, 6 of the 11 people in the family came down with typhoid fever. The disease at the time was unusual in Oyster Bay, according to 3 medical doctors who practiced there. Mallon was subsequently hired by other families and outbreaks followed her everywhere. In late 1906, one family hired a typhoid researcher named George Soper to investigate. Soper published the results on June 15, 1907 in the Journal of the American Medical Association. He believed Mallon might be the source of the outbreak. He wrote, "It was found that the family changed cooks on August 4th. It was about 3 weeks before the typhoid epidemic broke out. She remained in the family only a short time, leaving about 3 weeks after the outbreak occurred. The cook was described as an Irish woman about 40 years of age, tall, heavy, single. She seemed to be in perfect health." Soper discovered that a family Irish cook, who fit the physical description he was given, was involved in all of the outbreaks. He was unable to locate her because she generally left after an outbreak began without giving a forwarding address. Soper learned of an active outbreak in a penthouse on Park Avenue and discovered Mallon was the cook. 2 of the household servants were hospitalized and the daughter of the family died of typhoid. When Soper approached Mallon about her possible role in spreading typhoid, she adamantly rejected his request for urine and stool samples. Since Mallon refused to give samples, he decided to compile a 5-year history of Mallon's employment. He found that of the 8 families that hired Mallon as a cook, members of 7 claimed to have contracted typhoid fever. On his next visit, he brought another doctor with him, but again was turned away. During a later encounter when Mallon was herself hospitalized, he told her he would write a book and give her all the royalties. she angrily rejected his proposal and locked herself in the bathroom until he left. The New York City Health Department finally sent physician Sarah Josephine Baker to talk to Mellon. Baker stated, by the time that she was convinced that the law was only persecuting her when she had done nothing wrong, a few days later Baker arrived at Mellon's workplace with several police officers who took her into custody. Mellon attracted so much media attention that she was called Typhoid Mary in the 1908 issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association. Later, in a textbook that defined typhoid fever, she was again called Typhoid Mary. That's kinda mean in some way if you ask me, but okay. Mellon admitted poor hygiene, saying she did not understand the purpose of hand washing because she did not pose a risk. In prison, she was forced to give stool and urine samples. Doctors found a significant nidus of typhoid bacteria in her gallbladder. Authorities suggested removing her gallbladder, but she refused as she did not believe she carried the disease. She was also unwilling to cease working as a cook. The New York City health inspector determined her to be a carrier. Under sections 1169 and 1170 of the Greater New York Charter, Mellon was held in isolation for 3 years at a clinic located on North Brother Island. Eventually, Eugene Porter, the New York State Commissioner of Health, decided that disease carriers should no longer be kept in isolation and that Mellon could be freed if she agreed to stop working as a cook and take reasonable steps to prevent transmitting typhoid to others. On February 19, 1910, Mellon agreed that she was prepared to change her occupation and upon her release take such hygienic precautions as would protect those with whom she came in contact from infection. She was released from quarantine and returned to the mainland. Upon her release, Mellon was given a job as a laundress, which paid less than cooking. She soon changed her name to Mary Brown and returned to her old occupation. For the next 5 years, she worked in a number of kitchens. Wherever she worked, there were outbreaks of typhoid. However, she changed jobs frequently and Soper was unable to find her. In 1915, Mellon started another major outbreak. This time, at a hospital for women in New York City. 25 people were infected and 2 died. She again left, but the police were able to find and arrest her when she brought food to a friend on Long Island. After arresting her, public health authorities returned her to quarantine on North Brother Island on March 27, 1915. She was still unwilling to have her gallbladder removed. Mellon remained confined for the remainder of her life. She became a minor celebrity and was occasionally interviewed by the media. They were told not to accept even water from her. Later, she was allowed to work as a technician in the island's laboratory, washing bottles. She spent the rest of her life in quarantine at the Riverside Hospital. 6 years before her death, she was paralyzed by a stroke. An autopsy found evidence of live typhoid bacteria in her gallbladder. Her body was cremated and her ashes were buried at St. Raymond's Cemetery in Bronx. She was quarantined multiple times during her life. That must be pretty stressful and bizarre for a person, I'd imagine, because to some degree you are innocent. You're not necessarily trying to infect others. That's what I think happened here. Maybe I'm wrong and she did secretly know about it and caused all of this on purpose, because she was warned not to work with others or to do things differently than she was doing before, and she pretty much ignored that. At the same time, I think it's highly unlikely that she did all of this on purpose, and that she had dark reasons for doing so. Let's just assume she was overall a nice person who ended up living a rather tragic life. I do admit there's one thing that's creepy about this story, and that's the fact that not many years ago, when people did get sick, it would be easy to cause death around you. You're like a living nightmare that nobody could escape from. I'm just glad these days we have better ways of dealing with sickness. Anyways, if you found this story interesting, please hit the like button below. And as always, dear viewer, have sweet dreams.